One of the biggest problems in the preparedness community is a thought process that has permeated it for quite some time that I believe is extremely detrimental and misleading. And something we have to understand is that during a long-term emergency scenario, our greatest risk is also our greatest asset. And when I say that, I'm referring to other people. But there's a lie that we've been told for a very long time now about OPSEC being a requirement, which keeps us more isolationist and stops us from talking to others about being prepared or having additional supplies or building a community. And it would be easy to assume that that may have been leveraged against us on purpose based on the fact that there are powers out there that would prefer us not to organize in any meaningful way. So while you're making your preparedness plans, I want you to consider the fact that OPSEC is no longer as important as everybody has made it out to be. And in fact, I look at it as being non-existent at this point in time. In 2025, we have access to AI as the general population. Your OPSEC doesn't exist. If someone wants to find out about you, they will. It is available to them. And when it comes to government agencies or organizations, they have access to even more information than we do, regardless of any effort you take to try to avoid it. And this concept of not leaving a paper trail and not doing any type of electronic transaction and constantly trying to hide your tracks whenever you do anything of any kind is basically a waste of your time at this point. If someone wants to know what you're up to, they will find out. And your neighbors know more about you than you think they do. There's a saying in rural communities that if you're living in the country, you're being stolen from, you just haven't found out yet. And there's some real truth to that. People are not as dumb as you might think. They know what you're up to. They know what you've been working on. They're paying attention to a degree because you're doing stuff, and a lot of other people are not. And that might not be a big deal because in reality, you should be making a connection with those neighbors who are watching you doing said stuff because we're going to need them. And that's something that we really need to be better about here in this community. We will need other people. It's been proven to us and shown to us time and time again, whether or not it's natural disasters, where communities come together to try to bail each other out, which we saw with Hurricane Helene and many other disasters that have happened here recently in the US. And it also happens with man-made disasters. There are communities in war-torn countries right now who've come together to try to protect each other during those very scary and tumultuous times. But if OPSEC is your main concern and something bad happens, who will even know that you need help? Who will show up to support? Who will be aware of the fact that you're missing or that your family hasn't come around lately or that there isn't any traffic coming down your road or whatever it might be? We've been told to isolate ourselves this entire time because of the dangers of other people knowing you have supplies. But the reality of it is that people are going to end up being more important than the small amount of supplies you have on hand. And if you don't have people, then the supplies don't matter anyway. Because if enough people decide you don't need them, there's not much you're going to be able to do about it. So I'm recommending that you stop prioritizing OPSEC and using it as an excuse to not only isolate yourself and maintain some level of privacy, I guess, which doesn't currently exist in my opinion. And also using OPSEC as a way to remain comfortable and get complacent about your personal security because, well, no one really knows what I'm up to, so I don't have to really worry about it, right? I suggest not prioritizing it anymore and just trying your best to get out there and meet like-minded people and have discussions about why they should be prepared and why you prepare and why you don't think it's so obscure to consider these strange possibilities that could exist at some point in time here in the future. These are things that I think are, well, common sense at this point. But our community as a whole has been fed the OPSEC lie for so long that people are afraid to even admit the basics. Things like firearms ownership, where people love to make the comment about their boating accident and everything else related to that. No one is missing the idea here that you have some level of ownership or participation in that area. Anyone who wants to know about it's going to find out. You are on a list. You can't avoid being on one anymore. The surveillance state already exists and it's in full swing. And there's not much we can do about it because as technology grows and as it becomes more powerful and more widespread, our digital footprint becomes easier to track. And you have one even if you don't use the internet. You still have one, even if you have tried not to. And so I guess the point of this conversation is to stop limiting yourself based on something that's not even real anymore. And to stop trying to isolate yourself from everything that's going on in the world just because you have more cans of food than the next guy. Because in reality, the next guy might be the one that helps you fill sandbags while the cans of food just sit in the pantry. And these are all things that I just throw out there for you to consider, especially when it comes to planning, because I've been that way for many years, and I'm starting to recognize some of my mistakes. And I don't think OPSEC is as real as we were told it was. And obviously, I'm very public about my preparedness. I'm sure people in my town are aware of who I am, where I live, what I do, and most likely what I have. And that's just the reality of being on the internet in the fashion that I am. But you'd be surprised how much the people in town know about everyone else as well. Or would you? Because if you live in a small town, you know how this works. If you live in a big city, it's easier to have a level of anonymity, but if someone wants to know what you're doing, they will. And so move forward in your preparedness, prioritizing what actually matters. People, assistance, support, community, and understanding that our job as civilians in a long-term emergency scenario is going to be stabilization more than anything else. And in order to stabilize a community, you have to be part of it. Because if you're not part of it, you're an outsider. And if you're an outsider, you could potentially be a threat. And at that point in time, you have to ask yourself the question, what's a better position to be in during said long-term survival scenario? The outsider who's potentially a threat against an organized community who's concerned about potential threats, or part of the community who's concerned about potential threats that allows you to have a say in what is happening or not happening based on your experience and knowledge of preparedness in general. Will they ask for your help? Probably. Is there a potential that some of your supplies might have to go to help others? Yeah. Is that something that we should be considering and willing to do regardless? Probably, right? So I think we need to get out of our shell, get out of our box a little bit, and stop being so concerned about being the last man alive on Earth. Because what's the point of that, right? I don't want my community to fail. And if you sit on the sidelines and allow it to, the consequences of that failure are going to affect you at some point, regardless of how you feel about it. And that is what OPSEC breeds. Inaction, isolation, and making you part of the threat profile. It's 2025. AI is rampant. The internet has access to everything you can imagine. Everyone carries a phone, which means you can be triangulated even without one. This is just the way things work. It'd be better to have a team than to have no one know you exist. And that's just the reality of it. So let me know in the comments what you think about this conversation. Do I think that a level of OPSEC has some practicality to it? Sure. Should you tell everyone on your street, especially if you live in a dangerous area, that you've got gold bars and an armory in your basement? Probably not. But should you be willing to talk to your next door neighbor and say, hey, if there's an emergency, make sure we touch base with each other to make sure we're okay. And if you need something, let me know. I think that's a reasonable approach, right? Anything else you need from me at all, go to magicprepper.com. And besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.